Okay, so yeah, I want to talk about the Laci Green situation, the ongoing, the developing Laci Green situation, because it seems to be getting nastier and darker by the minute. You know, it's kind of interesting just in the round that one of the things we've all heard this time and time again. Really, are you a feminist? Are you not a feminist? All you need to do, all it means to be a feminist is that you believe that women are equal to men, that you believe the equality of men and women, and that men and women should effectively be judged on their own merits, and not prejudiced in advance, right? Don't judge women in advance on the grounds that they were women. Just judge them as an individual on their individual strengths and weaknesses. That's all it means, folks. That's all it means. It's not as if there's some kind of fucking 100-point plan that you have to sign up to. And yet it would seem that somewhere down the line Laci has signed up to this 100-point plan, and that she's just deviated on one or two of those points here. And the fucking nastiness that has erupted from it, it started just as a little bit of criticism. But now I think largely because she's dating this guy, this Chris Ray Gunn, who it turns out is a white supremacist. Now, I'm afraid I can't furnish you on why he's a white supremacist, because although I've read it now probably about 200 fucking times, I've not heard a single thing cited. I've heard lots of, well, what exactly has he done, but I've not actually seen anything as to what he's actually said or what he's actually done that has given that label. What I would imagine is, given how low the bar has been set for all the other hyperbolic terms that are being used, my assumption is it doesn't take very much nowadays before you're labelled a white supremacist. But as a result of her dating him, and daring to do something like that, the fucking vitriol she's got, and from some of the most, well, eye-opening sources. One of them is the YouTuber Zinnia Jones, the trans woman Zinnia Jones, who, I mean, let's be honest, right? If I'm being reasonable here, somebody who has suffered a fair amount of, shall we say, metaphorical jackboots to the neck over the years. And it's kind of scary how, when given the upper hand over something like this, how quick somebody like Zinnia is to get those fucking laces done up on a pair of such boots and place them on the neck of somebody else. It kind of tells you something about the human psyche, doesn't it? Something not very nice, I would say. But amongst all this general vitriol and nastiness and bile, there's been some specific points that I think have come up. One has got to do with the appeal to moderation, and another has got to do with allyship. Those are the two things that I really want to talk about here. So first off, I want to talk about the appeal or argument to moderation, which is actually the thing that kind of motivated this video. Why? Because I have a kind of personal interest in this, because over the years I've been accused of being a fence-sitting wanker, right? Now, I hold my hand up to the wanker part of it, not on camera, obviously, it's always done in private, but the fence-sitting part, which the accusation is done on camera, I've always somewhat objected to. But one thing I'd never been accused of, actually, was making an argument to moderation. But recently I've started getting that, it seems to be in vogue very much, that as an accusation, that effectively what you're saying is that the truth necessarily lies in some compromise between vastly opposing positions. Obviously that's fallacious, that's not necessarily true. I think anybody would recognise that. But I've had that accusation, and what I've noticed is that Laci has had the same accusation made against her repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. Let me play you a clip that is just a sort of exemplar of what I'm talking about. It's Chrisiosity. Don't lay too much of the blame on Chrisiosity. She's not the only person to say this, and actually she's probably one of the more reasonable voices of the people that have said it, but it's just a nice little clip to show. So here's a clip of Chrisiosity.
Some other logical issues she's having include her constant fallacy of the mean and fallacy of false equivalences, as she paints the SJW and anti-SJW as having two equal extremes, and herself as the sane one in the center. Now let's put aside the false equivalence bit just for now, because I don't want to be here all day, and focus on the fallacy of the mean, or the argument to moderation. It's also known as middle ground, false compromise, etc., etc. And it asserts that given any two positions, there exists a compromise between them that must be correct.
I mean, you tell me, right? I'm assuming you as the viewer have viewed more than a handful of videos on YouTube. You tell me, would you say that the big problem on YouTube nowadays is appeal to moderation? Yeah, that's the problem on YouTube nowadays. There's just too many moderate voices out there, isn't there? People just aren't polarized enough, are they, on YouTube? That's the problem with getting to the nub of the issues that we have here. It's akin, as far as I'm concerned, to walking onto a fat camp and highlighting your primary area of concern as being anorexia. That's how wide of the mark it is. Jesus, I dream of the day when argument to moderation is a serious concern on YouTube, because it might be a fallacy, but by Christ, I wish we had a little bit more of that fallacy and a little bit less of the polarization, of the false fucking dichotomies, of the either or scenario that infests and festers within large tracts of the YouTube socio-political community. Bollocks is appeal or argument to moderation. And the problem, and bollocks to sort of highlighting that as a major area of concern. All you are doing there is saying it's the First World War, we've set out our trenches, and does not anybody try and end this by doing anything, right? By suggesting that maybe we try and make some kind of peace process. No, it's a war of attrition, and either we're going to win or they're going to win, and that's the only outcome that's acceptable. Okay, that's that problem, but the underlying problem, I think, as far as Laci is concerned, I propose is this whole business of allyship, that Laci hasn't been a good ally. I've lost count of how many times that I've heard that Laci's she's just throwing people under the bus now. Oh my word, Laci was on it and she's thrown us all under the bus. You see, this is where I think Laci Green has got it wrong over the last few years. And it's part and parcel of what has led to all of this. It's not that Laci Green is a feminist, she's entitled to that. It's not that she's got feminist views. It's not that she's expressed those feminist views. It's that she's described herself as an ally, that she's allowed others to describe her as an ally and allowed that to go unchecked. Because by doing so, you're effectively ideologically enslaving yourself to the people that you wish to help and limiting yourself and limiting what you can do and say. Because I'm afraid that allyship fosters entitlement, because entitlement isn't one of these things that only privileged people can be afflicted by, right? It's generally viewed in that context, isn't it? All these privileged people think the world owes them something. I'm afraid entitlement is an equal opportunities employer. It is something that can afflict anybody, whether you're privileged or otherwise. And to claim otherwise makes about as much sense as saying, well, poor people would never steal, would they? That's only something that rich people would do. And I'm afraid there's the kind of people that you end up on board with if you claim that you're an ally, are the kind of people who pretty much whatever you do, it's barely enough for them to hold you in anything above absolute contempt. Let me give you an example of just what I mean. I've got an example here. I'll throw it up on the screen of something that I was linked to on Facebook. Okay, let me show you it. Okay, so this is the Facebook post which I was linked. Actually, it wasn't me specifically who was linked, but people that I'm friendly with on Facebook, and that people were talking positively about, mainly I think because it was knocking Laci Green. 8.7 thousand interactions, most of them positive, 2,800 comments. And to be quite honest, this is one of those pieces which, if you sort of reversed the races that are involved, is Stormfront kind of territory, really, here. And yet this is the kind of thing that is calling Laci out for being a poor ally. And I just wanted to read a couple of little bits out with regard to this. It mentions that Chris Ray Gun a couple of times is a white supremacist. White women are the beneficiaries of white privilege. Even if white supremacists shit on white feminists like Laci Green, at the end of the day, white supremacists still see white women like Laci as instrumental to white supremacy. Racist white men will always need white women because part of their objective is racial preservation, and they can't preserve the white race without white babies. So presumably that's what Chris Ray Gun's, approach is here. He needs a white woman in Laci Green so that he can have his white babies and preserve the white race. I've never heard such shite in my entire fucking life. But just have a listen. These last couple of paragraphs really sum this up with regard to this whole business of allyship. You tell me if this is somebody you'd want to be a fucking ally for. Laci Green is one of the most known, if not the most known SJW on YouTube. And if she can turn her back on people of colour and fuck a white supremacist, how the fuck do you think people of colour should feel about the entirety of white allyship? How can any of us trust white women? Yeah, because that's what you should do, of course, right, is that if somebody of one particular race does something you don't like, then you should mistrust all of them. You should just collectively blame the whole lot. How can any of us trust white women, let alone YPIPO, whatever the fuck that means, as a collective? So listen to this bit. I'll repeat this over and over again, white allies. This is cracking stuff, this. You're welcome on this page, but we don't need you. Don't overthink that I owe you shit and that you deserve an ounce of my respect. You are just another Laci Green, and I will always hold this page as a space for people of colour with people of colour mods. You ain't a member here, you're on a 30-day trial. I've got to say, is there anybody who reads that and immediately thinks, well, this is somebody that I want to ally for? No, this is a racist piece of crap. Why anybody has thumbed this up beggars fucking belief. Unless you yourself are a black supremacist or a white supremacist or a racial separatist or a race realist or somebody along those lines. Because the person who has written this, by any normal metric, is a racist piece of crap. I mean, if you can't differentiate between being on board with a group of people on certain issues and then separating that from siding and being an ally for somebody such as the person who wrote this particular piece on Facebook, then I don't know what to say. I don't know what further argument I can offer you with regard to that. All I can say is that in my observation, being an ally seems to just inevitably attract bigoted, narcissistic pricks like the person that wrote this Facebook page. And it seems that being an ally kind of necessarily involves being prepared to be some kind of verbal punch bag and outlet for the prejudices of people so myopic of vision that they don't seem to even be able to entertain the possibility that they may suffer from privilege and entitlement themselves. So that's enough of that. That's what I would suggest Laci Green's issue was there, was the business that she tied her hands by claiming to be people's allies, and effectively by doing that, they're just using that against her now to try and ideologically bind her in to saying what they want her to say rather than what she actually believes. And the tragedy of all of this is that effectively what it means is that this becomes a bit of a missed opportunity. Rather than this being what I'd hoped it was, and I think what a lot of people hoped it was, which was a kind of a reach across the table from somebody who had the kind of pull, who had the kind of audience for it to actually matter, that effectively that's being stymied now because her own camp are disowning her. Her own camp are telling her what a piece of crap she is and that they want nothing to do with her or what she's doing. And so effectively that renders anything that she can do somewhat moot, which is an absolute shame. It leaves us back into the same position. And I could understand it actually from her perspective if she just had nothing more to do. If she thought, you know what, you can all just go Fuck yourselves. I'm not saying she would say that about feminism. I hope she doesn't. I hope she sticks by what she believes, and I hope she keeps separate her views from her opinions on other people who happen to share the same views. But one thing I know, right, is that you can go online. This is what I found is that I can go online and I can be told what a wanker I am, what an incorrigible piece of scum I am, 100 times. And if 100 of those occasions if they're all from people who I know are ideologically opposed to me, they're not on my side, they're not on my camp, right? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't make the slightest impact upon me. In fact, I often walk away with a little bit of a wry smile on my face at some of the misrepresentations, actually. But all it takes is one person that I would regard as generally being on my side to make the same kind of comments, and it really cuts to a place that none of those other people can reach. And it must be hurting Laci, this must really be hurting, because these are people who they have the silver bullet, don't they? They have the silver knife that can actually hurt Laci, because these are other people that identify as feminists and share a lot of her socio-political views. And I can understand how much this could be hurting Laci, and they must realise how much this must be hurting her. And yet it doesn't stop, does it? We talk about dogpiling. We talk about people sending hate mobs and brigading on YouTube. Brigading hurts twice as much when the brigade comes from your own camp. Either these people don't have the self-awareness to realise that, or they just couldn't really give a fuck about that. I would absolutely understand it if she cut off all ties with these people and said, do you know what? You can all go fuck yourselves. I'd absolutely understand that. What I do hope is that she at least sticks by what she believes. It's just a shame that any discussions that result now won't have potentially the same impact that they would have had. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.